Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Objective. It's my turn to host today, and I've got James with me. Thank you very much for joining me, James. Our topic today is Leonard Peikoff's lecture, A Picture is Not an Argument, and we're going to be talking about that in the context of the current conflict in Israel, of course. Just before we get to that, though, we're going to start with the standard news briefing. The headlines today have been fairly standard as the war has gone on. Perhaps the most notable thing that's been in the headlines is heavy fighting that's been going on in northern Gaza around the Shifa hospital. So the Shifa hospital, the Israelis claim, is, or at least where they think the Hamas headquarters is likely to be, since it's so heavily defended. Something we've also seen is that as Palestinians have fled the hospital, they've been gunned down by the Hamas forces. It's not exactly clear why that is. Perhaps they're trying to keep them there as hostages, or perhaps they're viewing it as betrayal. But unfortunately, that's what's been going on. Syrian President al-Assad has touched down in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. This is ahead of an Arab nation summit. The world is kind of keeping a close eye on this as it unfolds, basically because this is likely to determine the standard Arab nation response as we go forward. Which obviously is not going to be favorable to Israel. The Iranian foreign minister today was intensifying the hostility of their remarks towards Israel, if you could believe that they could get more hostile. And we've also seen Turkey kind of further throwing its lot in with the Arab nations by extending further support to Palestine, increasing their hostility to Israel, and so on and so forth. And then further from the Israeli side, Netanyahu has been trying to fight off claims that, or worries that, Israel is going to occupy Gaza after the war. He's saying, no, it's just going to be a period of military control, and so on and so forth. So that's been the headlines for today. I believe we're starting with a video, though. Is that right? Do you want to introduce the video, James, or should we just go straight into it?
Well, as many people may know, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib was censured by the House of Representatives for racist, pro-violence remarks. She endorsed From the River to the Sea, and she never condemned the slaughter on October 7th. And in that situation, she was censured. Now, she's, of course, come out with her own defense about what the river to the sea is actually a slogan, don't you know, for all faiths and all ethnicities living in peace and harmony together there. And that's what it's always meant to her. And so she was, absolutely lying about it. But we have a clip here from her defense on the House floor where she's defending herself against these charges that would lead to her censure.
Palestinian people are not disposable. We are human beings, just like anyone else. My city, my grandmother, like all Palestinians, just wants to live her life with freedom and human dignity we all deserve. Speaking up to save lives, Mr. Chair, no matter faith, no matter ethnicity, should not be controversial in this chamber. The cries of the Palestinian and Israeli children sound no different to me. Why? What I don't understand is why the cries of Palestinians sound.
There we have it. Obviously, she's lying, and it's dishonest on the face of it. It's designed to fool people. She's not that stupid. She knows. She never condemned, as I say, October 7th. So she does discriminate against Palestinian and Israeli babies. She wants only Israeli babies to die. Her position was that there should be no response from Israel from the outset. Not only did she fail to condemn October 7th, she called for a ceasefire within 2 days. So before Israel had done anything in response whatever, she was calling for a ceasefire. So in fact, her actual position, in fact, is I only want to see Israeli babies die. I do not tolerate the death of any Palestinian babies. So she has a perfectly racist position in substance and in fact. But you can see with the long pause in the beginning and then her colleague putting the hand on the shoulder, it is an appeal directly to bypass reason, logic, facts, anything that might conceptualize this in an accurate way. She's an appealing directly to emotions, and I'd just like to, Dr. Peacock's wonderful 1998 speech at the Ford Hall Forum, "A picture is not an argument." We can expand that conceptually. The sounds of babies crying is not an argument. And here she says the sound of babies, Israeli babies crying, and the sound of Palestinian babies is no different. And that she somehow cannot understand why people are indifferent to the death of Palestinian babies. No, 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 no. The death of Palestinian babies is on Hamas. Hamas is refusing. In fact, in the headlines you were just noting there, they're shooting people as they try and leave the hospital. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday said on an American television interview that they're going to open up these 4-hour pauses, okay, and with 3-hour notice, mind you. And he is indicating on the face of it, only the Israelis care about Palestinian civilians. Hamas and the Palestinians have showed no concern for Israelis. It was a brutal, savage surprise attack on civilians, as brutal as you can imagine. And that is, how do you have to counter that? You have to drop that, show images, get people all riled up. There's no difference, so that it's simply a matter of body count. If she cared about her mother, she would oppose Hamas. If she cared about Palestinian babies, she would oppose Hamas. Hamas is the common enemy of both Israeli babies and Palestinian babies. And rather than go through that process of conceptual identification, and it's not that difficult, a conceptual identification in this case, as I say, it's not as though Israel has been occupying Gaza. That's a lie. Gaza's been controlling the area. And they haven't stopped lobbing rockets since they took power 17, 18 years ago. They immediately came in lobbing rockets, and nor did they stop lobbing rockets after October 7th, mind you. So in her mind, she has to justify the slaughter of Jews as such. Her racism has to be justified. And so what she'll do is she'll turn it on its head and call you the racist because you don't recognize the value of Palestinian babies. She is making an overtly racist argument, anti-Semitic argument, and she's calling it anti-racism. Anti-racism. And how do you do that? You have to drop the conceptual context here of who's actually responsible for the death of those babies. So a baby's cry is no more than a picture of her grandmother, an argument here. If she cared about her grandmother, if she actually cared, and if her grandmother really does want peace, then she should be advocating the overthrow of Hamas and the peaceful, and they should, Hamas, of course, refuse. In the wake, she knows this, Rashida Tlaib knows this. In the wake of October 7th, leader of Hamas said, "We will continue doing October 7th until there is no more Israel." So ignoring Hamas's call for outright genocide, ongoing attacks, ignoring all of that, she says Israel must stop its activity. So in practice, what she's advocating is the genocide, and in her lies about what river to the sea means, obviously, is a giant exercise in conceptual deception, using emotionalism, images, sounds, in order to create an equivalence here that does not exist, in order to bypass all the facts that would lead to a proper generalization about who is responsible for the death of Palestinian children. Benjamin Netanyahu said that not only are Hamas using guns to keep people at places like the hospital and in northern Gaza, they're attacking the safe passage corridors. Now, I understand that Israel is going to take extra special steps to protect those safe passage zones. Israel is the only one who cares about Palestinian civilians. Hamas is killing their own people on purpose. They are killing their own people on purpose precisely to augment their own casualty numbers in a propaganda war. So it is part of their policy, and again, Rashida Tlaib is ignoring completely, that it is their overt policy to kill their own children, maximize their own deaths, so that they can have a beef, some emotionalist beef like Rashida Tlaib is making here. Exactly this kind of emotionalist plea on behalf of babies, which is obscene on the face of it. She is the racist. She wants the violence all on one side. She has never condemned these atrocities. She wants Israel wiped off the face of the earth, and her lies trying to say that anyone who doesn't see this is the racist. They're the ones not distinguishing between Palestinian and Israeli. Just an outright lie, obvious to anyone who's paying attention to the facts here. And I guess that's all I have to say about that. I'd set out today, as I indicated earlier, to be a little less emotional, as I understand that my passion gets the better of me as I discuss this topic. I tried, but I just could not help it. This woman is a racist, justifying the one-way slaughter of Israeli babies, and she is lying. And to do that, she uses pictures of her grandmother. She uses the sounds of the cries of babies, as if that could bypass the logic here. No, they have a common enemy, Ms. Tlaib, Congresswoman Tlaib, and it's Hamas. That is why Hamas must go, for the sake of both Israeli and Palestinian babies. She's got it all conceptually misidentified. And that is, of course, why an argument cannot, a picture or a sound of a baby crying, it cannot suffice as an argument. You've got to connect it with all the other evidence. Who is really responsible? What is the actual cause? What is the proper response? But to ignore the facts on the ground, such as Israel is the only side that gives a damn about civilians, is just such a gross blank out on her part, such a gross evasion on her part. And that's what she's relying on, using all that emotion and imagery and sound so that you don't even think about such basic facts as that, or forget the fact that she has not yet denounced the baby slaughter on October 7th, but can use the cries of Israeli babies in her own argument. It's disgusting. The level of her dishonesty, see, she knows better. She knows better. She knows it's an appeal to emotion. She knows she doesn't have the facts. If she had the facts, she'd cite the facts. No, she's citing emotion. She's citing images and sounds precisely because she's trying to appeal to the thoughtless, anti-conceptual mentalities out there who just have an emotional reaction. That's what it's all about. Emotions are not tools of cognition, ladies and gentlemen. A fully integrated conceptual identification is always required, especially in life and death matters such as this, let me suggest.
Yeah. Just before I wanted to say there's something I can't resist saying, which is whenever people bring up the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," that is, I think, a real clue that either they have no idea what they're talking about or that they're deliberately blanking out, because it isn't Palestine now. The idea that Palestine is free, or that Palestine ruled by Hamas is a free country or the free people, is completely ridiculous. And the idea that if they took over the whole region, they would then be free is just so absurd and awful.
As if they want freedom. As if they want peace and freedom. If Gaza had a single statement that said, we're just looking for peace and peaceful coexistence with Israel, just once, she might have a thin thread. I mean, I'd still question the belief. I mean, when you look at their actions, obviously, that would contradict what they're saying. But not once have they even said that they want peaceful coexistence. And this is what she's defending. Israel has repeatedly said they want peaceful coexistence. They unilaterally gave the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians, who promptly elected Hamas as their leaders.
So we're about halfway through. Let's introduce the context for Dr. Peikoff's original essay, or speech, rather. So if I'm getting it right, I believe he was invited to do a radio interview, or is it on a stage? I'm not sure, about abortion. And the moderator had said that the opponent wanted to bring some images of either real abortions or of fetuses in the womb, something like that. And this was what he really strongly objected to. I think he received a lot of criticism for that. I think probably on the grounds that he was scared of the truth, scared of the facts, something like that. And that prompted this lecture. Am I getting that right, James?
Exactly right. He had initially agreed to debate on the subject of abortion. And it was going to be a live debate, and the person was going to present images, these magnified images of pea-sized pieces of protoplasm that have human eyes and look sort of human. So he's trying to get us to believe that, when 90% of all abortions happen when the piece of protoplasm is just a pea-sized or microscopic, try and make this blown up picture of it, make it seem like it's a human being. Now, Leonard Peikoff refused to debate the person. He said no images from either side should be permitted. It should be a conceptual debate. It's an intellectual debate. I'm a philosopher. We're going to be discussing broad abstractions and generalizations and principles here, and therefore it would be totally inappropriate to try and appeal to people's emotions with images of 6-week-old fetuses. That would be an inappropriate way to argue for abortion. And he's absolutely right. An appeal to emotion like that, especially with an image, causes you to stop. See, one of the reasons why I brought up my own emotionalism here is precisely connected here. When someone is passionate and emotional about something, I do my best to try and be as objective as I can. But the truth is that when you do get wrapped up into your emotion, it oftentimes, and for some people, for those whose emotions and their reason are not properly integrated, let me suggest. I hope my passion is properly integrated with my values and my ideas. But for those who are not properly connected up inside the brain, an appeal to emotion will swamp out any logical argumentation. Now you're just hair splitting. Now you're getting technical. Now you're, oh, wait a minute, you're bringing up all these other facts when that's not relevant. The picture and the emotion was all I needed to answer the question. And when people are look at Rashida Tlaib's statement there, that long silence with the fake tears, oh my gosh, the crocodile tears. That is exactly the goal. So you don't think that you're overwhelmed with emotion about babies, innocent Palestinian babies dying. That's what she's aiming for. No one wants to see innocents die. Obviously, the babies are innocent. And so she's focusing on dead babies to overwhelm our reason and our conceptual thought about, well, who's responsible for the Palestinian babies dying? That's not an obvious question. It requires conceptual identification. You've got to know some history. You've got to know some context. You've got to know who the aggressors are. You have to know the policy positions of Hamas and Iran to understand the context of what's going on here. But that would involve integrating a whole bunch of other facts into conceptualizations and generalizations using some logic and reason. And that's exactly what she wants to bypass, what they all want to bypass. And that's why Dr. Peikoff's comments here apply so much. I mean, think of all the issues that it applies to apart from abortion and war. But abortion and war are just particularly vivid ones because, of course, people can use the emotion baby killer without dropping context altogether.
Yeah. One of the things that I think that's important that he says quite early on is that he's not concerned with images being used as evidence. And there's almost, I don't think he brings that, I think he brings up tangentially, but there's almost, and especially since you're a prosecutor, you can tell me whether it's the right way to think about it. There's almost, I think, a comparison to a courtroom that there's certain evidence that is proper to be introduced before the jury. So in this kind of debate, when he's going to be presenting things to an audience, he would only want things that are proper to be introduced. And that in this context, the use of images, it's almost more like the opponent is using something that's perceptually unpleasant, that's going to trigger a negative emotional reaction just automatically. And he uses, I think, the phrase that the image is going to seduce you or kind of bypass your conceptual faculties. So he wants images that are used in a way that's going to lead you to proper cognition of the world, rather than one that's going to subvert any rational argument, and so on and so forth. So, for example, when we get on Twitter, people are posting images of the war. I think I said last time I was on with you, James, that I think they're really the first, like, really graphic images of a contemporary war that I've ever really gone out of my way to go and look at. And it's immediately really affecting. There's something about the way that the ground is covered in blood, and that you see people or children and their limbs. It's so ridiculous, but it's almost because you realize that they're dead because they're lying in a way that it wouldn't be comfortable for someone to lie. Their limbs are at strange angles and their bodies are burned and so on. It's instantly awful. You really feel it. However, the fact that I've seen those images and I've seen that they're awful, does that change the truth or falsehood of an argument about the moral rectitude or not of Hamas or of Israel and the war going on? And I think what Dr. Peikoff wants you to get across, and the reason why this is a relevant lecture for this, is it actually doesn't change that at all. As awful as it may be, it doesn't change it at all.
Precisely. As a prosecutor, of course, I did use images, both still images, video images, all manner of images to prove if they had evidentiary probative value, if they helped decide a question of fact that was in contention in the trial. Its relevance has to be connected to its probative evidentiary value to a controversial matter, to a question. As a historian, I use images, archaeological images, ancient images from mosaics, coins, and so forth. And that's vital evidence. I mean, looking at ancient archaeology and coins, obviously, has probative value if you're making an argument based on the images or the inscriptions that are to be found there. It's not that images can't be used as important evidence. They can be. But let's say as a prosecutor, I'm doing a murder case, and I wanted to show a 2-hour-long video of my victim having a good time at their latest birthday party, laughing with their friends, blowing out candles on a cake, singing and dancing with their friends, and then show the reaction of all of her friends just crying and weeping at the funeral. I didn't show you anything about the murder. I didn't show you anything that connects the victim to the suspect. I didn't show you anything that might be probative, evident in an evidentiary way. All I did was show you the victim being happy at a birthday party and then all the victim's friends crying at the funeral. What probative value would either of those images have except to try and bypass your rational faculty, your ability to process relevant information, giving you something that's utterly irrelevant. We all know that this victim obviously had a life and enjoyed their life like we do, had friends who loved them and had good time with them. And we all know that this caused a great deal of pain to the friends and family of the murder victim. It does not help establish whether the defendant in this case actually was the guy who did the killing. And that's the distinction that Peikoff draws very well here. A picture of a fetus, the picture of a 6-week-old fetus, blown up and magnified, mind you, is actually distorting, utterly distorting. You can use an image to actually mislead people because it's not only got this emotional impact, but depending on how you present it, does it decide whether a piece of protoplasm should have rights? Does that decide what this will do to a woman's life if you force her to carry it to term? No, it does not. You have to think conceptually. You have to think about the past, you have to think about the future, and you have to do some mental integration, i.e. use your conceptual faculty. And yes, images can be probative. I think the images, I had traumatized myself by watching a good deal of the video that's been released about October 7th. And I have to say, it does leave me intensely I'm traumatized. I'm almost in a state of post-traumatic stress disorder from it. You can't watch those pictures without having. And so I have to take very careful steps, and I do self-consciously take conscious steps to set that emotion aside as much as I'm able to. On the other hand, I want to use that emotion where it is relevant. So when deciding the facts of who's to blame for babies dying, the image itself cannot stand alone. And so I have to think about the rest of the factual context, even the rest of the factual context from that horrible video of the atrocities on October 7th. I've got to expand my factual context to know that my conceptual identifications are valid. On the other hand, I don't want to lose that emotion. I want that emotion to come kicking back in at me when I have made the evaluation and that emotion is consistent with it. Now, use that emotion to motivate me, to make me impassioned and try and get my point across. But it has to be, the emotion has to come after we've conceptually identified it using all of the relevant facts.
Sorry, I just muted my mic because I just realized my neighbor's playing music. I'm sorry if you guys are able to hear that. So just to pick up on a couple of things, and then I want to ask you a question, see what you think of what I think, in a sense, our opponents might say to this. But just picking up on a few things I think that might help people grasp it. Some of the key words in your initial kind of statement about it, which summed up the issue nicely, I thought, was that images used in this way are tools of making you drop the context, and they're appeals to an emotion, and they're appeals to the perceptual in such a way that it goes past your cognitive faculty or your conceptual faculty. So I think those are key things to keep in mind. Now, so when people are posting these images online and they're posting them to try and get you to be more pro-Palestine or to be pro a ceasefire or something like that, if I then gave this case to them, what I would imagine they would say in response is, well, isn't Israel doing the same thing? Israel is getting journalists and it's showing them footage of the 7th of October and so on and so forth. And now, on your logic, isn't this improper? So what would you say to them in that case, James?
Well, I think I just sort of covered it with my own viewing of the video on October 7th. I do not treat that as even that. As much information as I did glean from that, and there's a whole bunch of information to glean from it, that is not the sole context here. There's a whole bunch of history. There's the history of Hamas ruling Gaza for the last 17 years. There's the whole history, and there's a whole future that I have to be concerned about. So those facts are not, even the facts of the video taken on October 7th is not sufficient. And you'll notice that our side, that is to say the pro-Israel side, is much better in creating the context, in explaining how Hamas has been getting control over the last 17, 18 years of Gaza. That's not been their occupation. And so it requires other facts, a whole set of other facts. What did the leader of Hamas say? Well, there's going to be October 7th until Israel's completely destroyed. He said that after October 7th. Now, that's another important fact. All the facts, the fact that Israel is opening up these humanitarian corridors, whether we approve of it or not, the fact that they've opened up these humanitarian corridors and safe spaces totally puts the lie to Rashida Tlaib's, Palestinian babies are being murdered in the same fashion, in effect, that the babies on October 7th were. No, they're not. They're being killed by Hamas. Israel is the only one caring about civilians in this case. So it still takes more facts. But I'm not saying that the image, if relevant, and in the case of the video on October 7th, it is relevant. It is relevant how horrific what happened. It is relevant that they're dismembering women and children. It is relevant that they're gouging out eyes, burning children and babies alive, mutilating dead bodies, raping people to death on top of the bodies of their dead friends. It is relevant. It is relevant. But I'm not going to, even there, I'm not going to drop the full context. In order to maintain the full context, I need to get up to the conceptual level that integrates the whole set of facts that are in front of me.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap up just before we start the reality show. I just want to say thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat for 99 cents. We always appreciate the continued support. Anything, just little final statements, James, or just before we get to the reality show?
God, no. I think I said it. We're seeing it all over the place. We're seeing it. Former President Obama, for example, was saying everyone is to blame. Now, of course, he's the guy who was the architect of the recent let's appease Iran and get a nuke deal at any cost. So let's give them billions and billions. And Biden has followed up on his former boss's policy of giving billions to Iran. He's the one with the blood on his hands. And he has the nerve to say, we're all responsible. It is no one is to blame. Morgan, I don't think you're responsible at all. I think you get a free pass on all this completely. You didn't kill anybody. Whereas Obama, who's been sanctioning Iran, so it's these sloppy kind of emotionalist arguments. It's complex. Don't think use your emotions. And it's all an effort to not think conceptually. And whether it's coming from Obama, whether it's coming from the Jeremy Corbyn crowd, or whether it's coming from Rashida Tlaib, it appeals to emotion. It's they are themselves covering their own racist attitudes. And the only solution here, ladies and gentlemen, is the complete and proper conceptual identification. We notice what Razi's policy was, and this was going to be my final thought. Razi's policy was not to show us the horrific images, but to discuss and describe what they show, by and large. And I think that's probably the correct way to go about it. I urge people, if they do have the psychological wherewithal, to check out at least portions of the video of October 7th, because it is relevant, probative information. But I will be the first person to tell you not to drop the context even of that, to hold all the facts in context, to not be overwhelmed by some sudden emotion, and to make sure that at the end of the day, your emotion actually aligns itself with your total best judgment. And only the conceptual faculty can do that, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely. And just before we go, I just recommend everyone to go, if you're more interested in this topic, to go check out the other video James did about Dr. Peikoff's lecture, A Picture is Not an Argument, which is really tremendous and goes on a bit longer. But thanks for joining me, James, and stick around, everyone, and we'll see you on the reality show in just in a minute. Okay?
Take care.